Okay, I wanted to bring out a couple of things. We're going to be moving into chapter, I believe it's 25 of the basic biblical Hebrew. We looked at the Niphal strong verb last week, and so we want to use that as our base to look at the Niphal weak verb here today. But as we begin to look at it, I want to bring out a passage in Exodus chapter 6 and verse 3. You might remember in this passage, this is where Moses is before the Lord, and the Lord is speaking to him about his promises to the nation of Israel to bring them out from under bondage. And what he says to Moses in verse 3, he says, "And I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." He's reassuring Moses of the promises that he's making to them, to Moses and his people, stem all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so he says, "And I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob." That is the Hebrew word Vaedra. Vaedra is in our Niphal form, but interestingly enough, it fits into the passage or the chapter we're looking at today. It is a weak verb. In other words, it has a first guttural. It's also doubly weak. It also has a third hey. These are, of course, the guttural verbs the guttural consonants are considered weak because they often change. And so also includes a first, or excuse me, a vav consecutive to it. What the Niphal here is saying, it's the original root is the resh, aleph, and hey. So it's really triple weak because it's got three all gutturals. First, the resh, sometimes a guttural, the aleph, and the third hey. And it does not simply mean I was seen. In other words, a passive form. Hey, you found me, and I was seen. But it carries the idea that I let myself be seen. I made myself visible. I revealed myself. So it's not an accidental kind of sight like hide and go seek where you found me, but it's a very intentional self-disclosure, of course, that God has done. And the patriarchs did not discover God. God revealed himself to him. And that's really the force of what this Niphal is bringing out today. And so I wanted to bring this out. And so when we look at the context of Exodus 6, Israel is enslaved. Moses is discouraged, and the promise seems to be maybe not, just delayed. It's not yet happened. The promises of the land promise, the nation promise, and the seed promise. And God responds not with some sort of strategy of how he's going to do things, but with revelation. He anchors deliverance in his identity. I appeared. And so before redemption comes, before redemption, there comes disclosure. Before deliverance comes revelation. And God saves by first making himself known. And so this verse quietly teaches us a very significant truth, that we do not arrive at God through some intelligent ascent, that we rise up to him as if the Tower of Babel people were trying to make themselves equal with God and building themselves up to the heavens. But we know him because he chooses to be known. Every true knowledge of God, the Niphal somewhat brings that out. I don't want to tie grammar to theology in of itself, but it's used to display theological emphasis that God reveals himself. He must reveal himself for us to know him. And that's true of the patriarchs, true of Moses, it's true of the prophets, and ultimately true in Christ. He revealed himself in Christ. So salvation begins with God stepping forward and actively revealing himself. So if you know God today, it's not because you were spiritually perceptive and you sort of in tune with him and you perceived him, but it's because he revealed himself. And of course, we know he revealed himself today in really two ways. As he revealed himself in his creation, right? And then we see his majesty in all his creation, but he has also revealed himself in his word. And so it's through his word we understand his will. In his creation, we see who he is. But in his word, we see what he expects and what he demands from us as the creator. We are the clay, he is the potter. We didn't climb high enough to know him, to see him, but he came down to display himself and to demonstrate his love for us. And so Exodus 3 reminds us that God is not hiding, but neither is he discovered by human effort. He is known because he chooses to be known, and that should humble us. And it should steady us too, in that he cares enough, he loves enough, that he makes himself known. The perspective of a deist would say God exists and he's up there looking at us, but he's not revealing himself. He's not participating in his creative acts, in his creation. And that is a false perspective. Well, we see it in exactly here in Exodus 6:3 that he is and has revealed himself and participates in his creative love, his creation, his people, in order to bring salvation, in order to bring redemption back to all humanity since the Garden of Eden. We go from the Garden of Eden to the Garden of Gethsemane in Luke chapter 22, into the Garden of Paradise in Revelation, where the tree of life is once more accessible through Christ. And so the revelation of God through his creation, through his word, and through his son is significant in that it brings us salvation. And so as we look in today into chapter 25 of the Niphal stem weak verb, we can be reminded that this grammar is used in a way to help us understand not only who God is, but what he does. And so we can all say amen to that. I want to go ahead now and jump into the chapter. And let's see, we have, David is here. Thank you, David. Still looking for Patrick. Let me share the PowerPoint. We can all my share screen. Okay, here we go. All right, let me go to here. Let me go here. And okay, I think we're good now. I think. Well, that's a little blurry. It's not going to clear up. I think, I hope. All right, also better. Yeah, a little bit better. All right. So I'll get this out of my way. And all right, so we want to begin by looking at the Niphal weak verb stem. And so we're going to really just, basically all we're going to do is examine how the weak verb is formed. Its function doesn't change, right? We did the Niphal strong. It functions in the stem as a simple kind of action. It is the passive voice or reflective voice. And so its function is going to be the same way. And we want to look at, of course, in all 6 conjugations, that is how they function in the context, that the perfect, the imperfect, the imperative, the infinite construct, the infinite absolute, and the participle. So, and of course, the weak verbs, as we've seen many times over, we're just going to be examining what has, how that form changes or is impacted. So let's start with the strong, just by memory or reminder, I guess. Morning, Patrick, glad you're here. All right.
Good morning. Thank you.
Morning, brother. If you remember in the Niphal, our strong is what we really see and we really like seeing, of course, is not in the first root position, right? Here's root 1, root 2, root 3, but in a prefix, right? In the prefix position, this the noon, and that is a telltale sign, of course, and that's an important diagnostic feature. So we'll see that in the perfect and in the one form of the infinite absolute and in the participle. But we also see this heric in a podic in our stem vowel, the heric with the noon and the podic. Now the heric is normal, right? We see the heric in our imperfect, right? There's that heric here, that heric here. So pretty consistent in the strong verb form. In our perfect position, we don't really lose the Niphal is assimilated into the Dogish here. And the other strong diagnostic feature, of course, is the first root position. First root position is a commate. So we'll have either with the noon, heuric, and a stem vowel. And so you see here you have the noon, heuric, and how do we differentiate the participle between the perfect? The stem vowel is a comates, not a podic. So it's not the podic here, it's the comates here. And that's how we can differentiate that. Of course, the same thing with the infinite absolute. We have our noon, heuric, but we'll have this whole involved long unchangeable vowel letter will help us in the diagnostic feature. And the other ones where the noon drops, it doesn't really drop. We have the Dogish forte there, and so that there we go. There's the other one. I knew there was another one. Dogish forte there, and then we see, of course, the comates, and that is very consistent. So hopefully you remember that kind of pattern, and that's what you're really looking for. The great thing about kind of looking at this, guys, is that if we remember our Cal perfect form, our Cal perfect form, imperfect form, imperative forms, infinite construct, infinite absolute, and participle forms, then what we're really looking at is just what changed from the Cal, right? So when we move to the Niphal, we're putting a prefix to it. We still have our imperfect prefix, but that Niphal is assimilating. Anybody remember why we have the hey here for the imperative? Because what we would expect is just that, where this drops off. That's what we would typically expect, but it's not that case. And so why do we have this hey here? Anybody remember why? Why is it here? Why is it here?
I think we don't know.
Okay.
If I remember, we couldn't figure out why.
You couldn't what?
We were talking about, is that we were talking about the why, and we didn't conclude.
No, we concluded this. I remember this. This wasn't a problem. The hey is there because it helps maintain the diagnostic features. Without this hey, here it goes away. Without this hey, the Dogish goes away. And all you're left with is the comates. And it'd be pretty difficult to recognize the diagnostic features that this is a Niphal verb of any form, strong verb. And so without the hey, you lose this. And so you just get this, the first three root letters with the comates as your only diagnostic features. It'd be very difficult to recognize. And so the hey is there to give us, to help strengthen and to maintain that heuric and that Dogish. The Dogish would go away. And so that's its purpose. And so it's a very useful diagnostic feature when you see this hey with the heuric and the Dogish forte and the comates. Same here, you have the yod, that's our imperfect performative, right? Our imperfect prefix. But there's the heuric, the Dogish, and the comates. It's the same thing. It's just that we've added this hey here in order to maintain those features, because you don't have, what happens when you go from the imperfect, we go to the heuric, we'll just do a call, and typically this is our perfect form. Typically that's our perfect. Well, wake up. Okay, not quite right. How does it work? Well, typically that's our perfect form, and then we make it imperfect. We do the heuric here, and we get the shavah here, and we'll get the holem there for the imperfect form, right? That's our typical, which means we don't have this. So when we go to the imperative form from the imperfect, call imperfect, I hope you remember some of this, and this is not really new, just a reminder. When you go to the imperative form, what happens? this drops off, and that's our imperative form, I think. I think that's right. Can't remember if this is the vowel or not, but anyway. So this hey is significant to help us to recognize to maintain the diagnostic features. Okay, that's a lot of stuff that probably confused you, but any questions? Do you remember all this? In our infinite absolute, we have this whole vav that is very diagnostically strong and remains there. We can have two forms with the Niphal and the Hiric. We don't need the Dagesh forte because we have the Niphal. But here we have the Hey with the Hiric, and so but we do have the Niphal assimilating to the Dagesh with the Kamate, so everything remains the same. It's just that we're seeing the infinite absolute diagnostic feature with that whole vav. You guys see all this? Is okay? Did that confuse anybody? Think of it this way. I'm trying to simplify as I can. All right. There are three forms with that maintains the noon prefix, right? The perfect, the participle, and one form of the infinite absolute. And in those three forms, they're almost exactly the same, except the stem vowel. And the perfect is the kamates, or excuse me, the apodic, and the participle is the kamates, and the infinite absolute is the Hiric, the holum vav vowel letter. In all the other forms, we have a prefix. The imperfect, we're used to a prefix, and we're used to that Hiric for the imperfect. And so the noon has dropped off, and we have assimilation with the kamates there in the first root position. Those are our diagnostic features. To maintain these diagnostic features, we include this hey in the imperative, the infinite construct, in one form of the infinite absolute. That's all that's happening. That's it. Okay? So in my perspective, it helps to know what's happening and why, so that as you begin to, like a detective, try to figure things out, if you have in the back of your mind some of the things that do occur, then it's easier to dissect what's really going on. And so anyway, that's our review. Everybody okay? Any questions so far? All right, good. Let's move to out of the Niphal weak. Now I'm going to maintain at the top here our Niphal strong. So our Niphal strong verbs are up here. The perfect form, the imperfect form, the imperative, infinite construct, infinite absolute, participle. And then we're going to look at the Niphal weak verbs. And we're going to start with the third hey. And so the third hey, here we go, third hey. And I want you to notice something. Every single form, the strong diagnostic features are retained, every single one, with one change. I think it's one change. All right. So the noon and the participle, the noon in the one form of the infinite absolute, and the noon and the perfect remain in the prefix. The Hiric under that prefix remains. And we have that kamates here. And the only thing that's different now is we have a kamates in the perfect form. And that's the only thing that would be different here. And so you do have a participle and a perfect Niphal weak form with third hey looks the same. Why did this podic change to a kamates here? Why did that happen? Anybody know?
Is it the effect of lengthening?
Well, it's not really lengthening because this is still root 1 position, root 2 position, and root 3 position. So I've done lengthening, but you're very close. It's because we have a third olive here. And so we get compensatory lengthening. So if that's what you meant, you're right. There's compensatory lengthening, or there's lengthening here. I don't know if it's compensatory lengthening right here with that kamates here. So I believe that's all that is. I think that's right. But notice in the other form, so we got our noon, everything's the same. Look at this. There's the exact same thing, the exact same thing, exact same thing. Everything's the same. right? Nothing else changes. So, really, the third olive is follows the strong pretty consistently. The only difference is going to be in the perfect form, where you get a lengthening here in the stem vowel position. Okay, it is really important to try to recognize root 1, root 2, root 3, our little 3 boxes. Okay, if the more you're able to sort of see that and find that, then when something drops off and you only got, oh, there's root 2, root 3, what happened to root 1? It's gone. Then you begin to sort of be able to help uh, break the puzzle in the various pieces and put them back together, kind of thing. So with the third olive for the Niphal week, you see very little changes to it. Any questions here? All right. All right. So again, we got our strong, just for comparison purpose up here. Try to make it more visible. Now we'll talk about third hay. Now, if you remember, third hay, of course, is very, very weak, drops all the time. We see a lot of changes because of third hay. But every single one of these changes you've already seen. There is absolutely nothing new. And one of the other fascinating things is that on the Niphal, the diagnostic features in the first half of the word remain the same to the strong. It's only at the second half of the word where the third hay drops that we see changes. But the diagnostic features for the Niphal remain the same. Notice the participle, for example. We have the noon hear it and the noon hear it. Now, we'll see the second half of this change because of the third hay drop. But notice in the infinite absolute, we see the same beginning, but we'll see a change at the end. And here we'll talk about the changes in a minute. Same thing here, same thing here, same thing here, same thing here, and same thing here. So the first half remains the same, and all the diagnostic features have not changed. If you compare these to the perfect, that's the same, 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 and that one too, and that's the same. So they're all the same. Now what does change is that third hay. But these are not new. You've seen already before, the gray here is the hay has dropped, right? This third hay has dropped, it's gone. But now it's replaced with this vowel letter. And they're really there's a Kametz hay vowel letter, Segol hay vowel letter, Saray hay vowel letter. And then we also happen to have the Holem Tav. That's the one unique thing that can be a little difficult to sometimes remember, recognize, because that kind of looks almost like a feminine plural, but it's not. It's the third hay drop, and it's replaced with that in the infinite construct form. So we see in here this holem. It's the same holem, except it's called. Remember, that's called a defective holem. Right, and so instead of having the unchangeable Holem Vav vowel letter, it's just produced as the Holem, and so that's there. And in the participle, we have the Segol hay. So what happens is the hay, now over here, the hay drops off. But if you remember also, why is that a yod with a saray? Why is that a yod? Anybody know? Anybody remember? That is more than once. Why is that a yod and not a hay?
Because third hay, it was third yod.
Yes, originally the third hay was a third yod. That's exactly right. So what happens is when you lengthen, as you were talking about earlier, Dubby, then sometimes the third hay doesn't drop, it just goes back to its original form. So the third hay is right there. It just goes back to its original in the third yod. And so here's root 1, root 2, and root 3. Let me clean that up a bit so it's not so ugly. Here's root 1, root 2, and root 3. This is a prefix, that's a suffix, right? A second masculine singular suffix. I think that's right. And the prefix. So there's our hey, except it's originally returned back to its original form of the third yod. That's all that is. Okay. All right. Let me just reiterate that in a different form. You've seen this before. In perfect 3ms, we'll have a kametz hey. It's really good to know this and to memorize this. And the imperfect is a segol hey, as same as the participle masculine singular. In the imperative, it's a sareh hey, but in the infinite construct, it's a whole vav tav. If you know those for third hey or third hey drops, this is the typical replacement forms, other than when it's in a yod, typical yod sareh, for the third position. So these are vowel letters. They are not the hey consonant, right? They're all vowel letters. And so ultimately, well, the tav is not, but the whole vav is. Anyway, that's so if you know this, and then you can remember that on the third hey, if I start seeing this form on the end of a verb, or this form, or any of these forms, there's a participle, and that's an imperfect. Now you have other diagnostic features, of course, like the imperfect, right? You'll have other diagnostic features, right? In the participle, you'll have other diagnostic features. So by putting the pieces together, you can figure out, oh, that must be a participle form. That must be the imperfect, because it includes the first, it includes the prefix, and then the perfect 3ms, and the infinitive construct is very consistent with the whole above top. Any questions? Does that make sense? Everybody's good, huh? All memorized? All right. All right. So now first guttural. Again, we'll have our strong up here. And so we could follow the same changes, right? So the first guttural here's our position 1, position 2, and position 3. So the position 1 is the guttural, right? The ayin in this case. Ayin, aleph, noon, or not noon, resh, and so forth, all the guttural ones. I wish I had it memorized. I should, but I don't. So the first guttural, what's interesting is it remains a lot of the same diagnostics in the perfect and the participle with the noon. We don't lose the noon, but it does the same thing as what we remember in the Cal 3ms imperfect. Okay, and that is because this is a guttural, this is going to be, it can't be a shavah, right? It can't be a shavah. So this case is a hatef segol. And here's a hatef segol. And so it can't be a shavah there that we would normally look for, right? We normally look for a shavah there, not there, but a shavah there. And it can't be because of the guttural position. So it takes the hatef, segol hatef. Well, if you remember that even in the Kal imperfect 3ms, you have the yod with, let's say, the katal. And we'd have, if this was well, I have to use a different word. I'm going to just say I'm going to make up something that's probably doesn't even exist, just for illustration purposes here. Okay. In our Cal Perfect 3S, let's assume this is an olive, right? You can't put a guttural in there, and you can't put it's a guttural, so you can't put a Dogus Forte in there. You can't put a segol or a shavah underneath it. So what do? You put the hatef shavah, right? And if you remember right, then that's going to follow that pattern. So if it was a potic hatef, then it would follow the pattern with a potic in the imperfect prefix. That's all that's happening. So because this is a guttural, and it cannot take the shavah that normally goes there, then it takes a hatef vowel, and the first prefix letter will mirror that vowel. And so that's what's happening here and here. That's what's happening here, right? The potic. It's a hatef potic because of that guttural position. And so the first prefix, the prefix position takes the same vowel. All right. So that's really, you've seen that more than once. All right. So the other thing is that why is this a sere? Anybody want to say why is that a sere? Why is it not a hierarch? You know the answer. I know you know this. Why is this a sere, not a hierarch? How come it's not a hierarch there? How come it's not a hierarch? Why is that not a hierarch? Why is it a sere? Think about the chart. Think about what we're talking about. The answer is in the name of the chart.
Is it because it is the first guttural or what?
Yeah, but think about why now. What happens? We've lost what? The noon, but we really didn't lose it. It normally assimilates, right, into this dogish. But it can't assimilate because it's a guttural. So what happens?
The gutturals cannot take dagesh.
Right. So here it becomes a sere because
because you have to compensate.
Yeah, to compensate the compensatory lengthening. That's right. So you've seen this multiple times. None of that is new. Just now applying it in this application here. Okay. And although I do realize, having done this, been in your position, a lot of this feels like, okay, it's a lot. But if you just begin to realize that, oh, I've seen that before, you may not remember it all, but you've seen that before, and you think, okay, I'm not really learning anything new. I'm just applying it in this situation. Because it's a first guttural, it cannot take a dogish. Because the noon drops, it needs the dogish. Well, the dogish won't go there, so it compensatory lengthens. All these are very consistent rules that help us to sort of figure things out. How do I know this is an imperfect? Well, it's got a prefix. There's a root 1, root 2, root 3, and I got a prefix. What's that in prefix? Oh, that's a yod. That's going to probably be an imperfect. And oh, this is first guttural. So that's why it's sere, because I should be seeing the dogish there. And that's how I know it's a Niphal, is that verb pattern, right? The verb pattern is what? It's the dogish with the kamates with the hierarch. Well, instead, I've got the kamates with the sere, but this particular word starts with a guttural. There's my clue, right? That's how I know it's a Niphal. That's how we begin to think and recognize the pieces. Okay, make sense, guys? You okay? So in our perfect, our participle, and one form of the infinite absolute, we retain the noon. So there's no compensatory lengthening, but we do have because it is a guttural and it cannot take the typical shava, then instead we get the hatef vowel. Hatef vowel, in that case it's a potic, this case it's a segol, and the noon is gonna mirror that hatef vowel, whatever the vowel is. Normally it's going to be a segol or a potic. And so, and then what we see is that, in this case, because of that, it's going to retain the perfect strength diagnostic feature. All the other diagnostic features remain the same. And technically, that is our our noon, because of that compensatory lengthening. It represents the noon. That is the noon. It represents the noon. It's still there. It's just not revealing itself, or it's revealing itself in a different form. This is the right way to say it. And so here, very key is, of course, the infinite absolute in either form, either with this hey in order to maintain the diagnostic features, or with the noon. Either way, that kamates or hovav is a very strong diagnostic feature for the infinite absolute form. Okay? You guys all right? Anything I confused you on? Speak up. We got time. Because we'll definitely finish early, by the way. So, simply because we're really just kind of building on what we know and just seeing what changed. The great thing about this is you don't have to memorize a whole bunch of new stuff. You just got to recognize what changed. And as you begin, so it does matter that you have a really strong understanding or a good strength in the strong form, But also, most important is all the paradigms in the cowl. You need to know those paradigms. But we learned them not as complete paradigms. We learned the diagnostic features. So if you really are strong in the cowl, then you see the changes from the cowl to the Niphal in the strong form, and then all you're doing is saying, well, what changed in my weak forms? And I'm just trying to recognize what changed. And what really is still key, I emphasize this over and over and over and over, is the three root positions. And when you start to see two, it may be there's some words that are two root biconsonantal. That's also weak form, but most often it's a triconsonantal form. And if you remember prefixes and suffixes, I don't have any suffixes here, prefixes and suffixes, then it makes it easier to start to recognize, to find the root, because that's your key. Okay? Any questions on first olive, third hay, or first guttural? All right, now we're going to move to. Actually, I did this chart, two more charts to help emphasize these changes. All right, so in our call imperfect, right? This is the call stem, not the Niphal. Call is a simple kind of action, right? But it's going to be active voice typically, where the Niphal is also a simple kind of action, but it's going to be more a passive or reflective. Type of voice. And so when we look at the third MS or the MS for the participle, because there's no number, right? And in our call imperfect, we had two different types. We had a type 1 and a type 2. Now, and you see, we're seeing the exact same thing. So this is not new there, because this is a guttural. The het is a guttural. It won't take a shavah. So it takes the hatef vowel. In this case, it's a segol hatef vowel, and as a result, the prefix, the yod, for the imperfect, or the tav if it's the next letter, it'll take the segol form. But you also have the type 2, which is going to be, instead of the segol, it's going to be the potic. So we've seen those before. Well, that's exactly all that's happening here. Right? There's our guttural position, our 1, 2, 3 position. And we have a hatef vowel with a segol for both the perfect and the participle, but then we have the potic, hatef potic for the infinite absolute. And so this prefix of the noon follows that potic, this noon follows that here, this noon, or follows segol, and so does that noon. And so it shouldn't be overly complex, but it is a lot. I get it. But if you start thinking about in terms of how they build from one another, my point is you're not learning anything new. You're just applying it in a different place. And by applying in a different place, you see it over and over and over again. Hopefully it strengthens what you have already learned. And that's what should happen. So it begins to make more and more sense. Is that what's happening, or am I confusing you? Everybody go, yeah, man, that is really great. Okay. Patrick, you got it? Okay. Baidu, you good? All right. I know Ben's got it. There you go. We're all good. Or you saw that, David. All right. So now, but the same thing now, if we continue on and we look at the Niphal, again, 3MS or the MS for the participle, which is not here. So I don't need it. And where the noon does assimilate, this is where the noon does assimilate, right? In the imperfect, there's the noon. In the imperative, there's the noon. In the infinite construct, there's the noon. And the infinite absolute, there's the noon. Excuse me, there we go. There we go. There's a noon in one form of that. And there's no participle, I guess, or I just missed it. I don't remember. I'd have to look. Let me see. We're doing Niphal first guttural, right? So Niphal first guttural. Um, yeah, I probably. Oh no, there's no participle because the participle doesn't. The noon doesn't assimilate. There's no perfect because the noon does not assimilate. The noon is retained. That's why I'm messing up here. All right, so here again, there's our prefix, right? There's root one, root two, root three. Our prefix, it should have a dogish, but it can't because of the guttural. So it gets compensatory lengthening. So our diagnostic features are retained or remain, but instead of having the dogish, it just lengthens the here to Sagol. Same thing with here. We keep this hey in order to retain the diagnostic features. Without that hey, that goes away, and all you got is root one, two, three, and this kamate. And you'd be like, oh, what is this? And so it is retained in order for us to recognize it, in order for the, I'd say for us, but probably to maintain the diagnostic features. The same thing here. We've got this hey in the prefix position in order to maintain those diagnostic features. In the infinite absolute, there's our whole vav vowel letter. And again, we maintain the diagnostic features. That is our noon, right? Our simulated noon right there. And so that's really what I want to try to bring out and make sure you see that. Everybody good? All right. All right, now, what do you do with the first noon? Again, these are our strong verbs just for reference. What do you do with the first noon, right? So really what you have is you have a root one position that is a noon, and you have a root two position, one, two, and a root three position, right? So my first root position is a noon, and then I want to add a noon for the Niphal prefix, right? So I want to add my noon here at there. Well, that's problematic. And so what happens is the noon where it normally exists drops and it will assimilate. Now, where does it normally exist? Well, it normally exists in the perfect and the participle and in the infinite absolute, one form, right? So it drops. Well, that's what this assimilated dogish is. So this is our root two position, our root three position, and this is the prefix. It is not the noon. That is the prefix. It is not the noon of the first root position. That is now here. Okay? And that can be a little confusing, but just think about, just like normally, if this noon were to drop, I need to give some sort of recognition or semblance of it. And so what they do is they put the dogish there. That's all that's happened. Okay, and that will occur everywhere there is a noon for the Niphal prefix. In other words, the noon is retained in the Niphal prefix, and so what happens is the noon in the root drops. Make sense? You guys okay? The root noon dropped. The prefix is retained, except it's retained in the dogish forte, as it should be in the next root letter, because that one's gone, so now it's here. So normally when the noon for the prefix is retained, the participle, one form of the infinite absolute, and the perfect, then the first root noon drops, and it is in that dogish forte. Okay? Or simulates. It doesn't really drop. That's the wrong word. But notice these other forms. Where's this noon? Where's that noon? Where's that noon? Where's that noon? Well, they're all here in that dogish. Okay? They're all right there. Well, that's the same. Nothing's changed. That noon is going to simulate. There it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. It's going to simulate. So this is not the noon. This is the the prefix noon. No, wait a minute. No, it's not. I can't remember. Let me see what the book says. Hold on. First noon on page, let's see, is this 280? Oh, 281 on 25.9 talks about in number one. Let's see, is that where I want? The noon that appears at the beginning of each form in these three conjugations, that's the perfect, infinitive, absolute, and participle forms. It is not the noon of the first verbal root. So this is that first root noon is gone or assimilates. The noon of the verbal root has assimilated into the second. That's what they're saying there. Okay, into the second. Got it. Number two, the imperfect, imperative, infinitive construct, and one form of the infinite absolute, right? One form of the infinite absolute, the infinite, the imperative, and the imperfect. The noon verbal root is retained. Okay, so this is the verbal root. That's what I was thinking. I thought I had it wrong. So this is the root. This is root 1, root 2, and root 3. What happens is the noon of the prefix for the Niphal is assimilated, which is the same thing we already had. That's the noon, right? That's the noon, or the prefix. So this is exactly the same as that, as that, and so forth, right? So we have our imperfect prefix, we have our root 1, root 2, root 3, our noon for the Niphal prefix has assimilated, and we got our other diagnostic features. So all our diagnostic features right there remain the same. And that's what's happening. So it can be a little confusing, but you have to think about, okay, again, root 1 position, root 2 position, root 3 position, and then a prefix. And sometimes I could have two prefixes, right? I might have the imperfect prefix, or I might have the Niphal prefix, and something's got to happen. Well, that Niphal will typically show up right there. And that's all that's really happening. As a result, this is here, excuse me. Yeah, and we get the comments here. Okay, does that make sense? You guys okay? Everybody good? You lost Patrick? Okay. All right, I'm going to move on. And now the first yod, that has the most confusion to it, the first yod. And here's why. In the same way that the third hey used to be a third yod, the first yod used to be a first, did that wrong. The mouth is moving, but brain is not. Okay. Used to be, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Third hey used to be a third yod. Here, the first yod used to be a first vav. I'm in the wrong place. There we go. For first vav. Is that clear? All right. And so what happens is that a lot of times this first yod reverts back to its original first vav. And that's the same thing that's happening. Now, be a little careful now when you look. What's the difference between this vav and this vav? Anybody know? What is this vav? How would you describe this vav? If you had to tell somebody, this is a vav what?
Olem Vav, is it?
Oh, vav. So it's a vowel letter, right? It's not a consonant. It's a vowel letter. So here, this vav, this first yod, which used to be first vav, appears again, except it appears as a vowel letter. What about here? What about here? What about here? Is that a vowel letter?
It can get confused with the shurek, but in this case, it's a vav with the dagesh forte.
There you go. That's exactly correct. And there's a couple of ways to recognize this. Number one, a shurek is a vowel letter, right? So if you look at it by itself, but you cannot have a vowel letter with a vowel underneath it. nor can you have three vowels in a row. Here's our Hirik, here's our Kamates, and that would be a Shurik if we saw it as a Shurik. That's not possible. So this cannot be a vowel letter. It is a consonant with a dogish. That's exactly right, because it has a vowel, the Kamates underneath it. Nor can it have a preceded by. I mean, you're going to precede by a Hirik and add and have a Shurik and with the Kamates? No, that doesn't happen. That's how you recognize it. Okay, so what's happening here is, again, the first yod is changed to a first vav. It's a pretty ugly vav. To a first vav, well, not necessarily with the dogish. And because and we maintain these same diagnostic features, but why is that dogish there? Why is the dogish there?
Is assimilating the num?
Yes, the noon has assimilated. So that's all that is. So this is exactly the same. The only problem is you don't see the first yod. This yod, by the way, right here, is not the first root one position. That's in that dogish, right? This is root 2, root 3, and that dogish is technically our root 1 in the noon. This is our imperfect prefix. The noon, of course, is our Niphal prefix, and it's assimilated to there. So that's correct. But we got the same diagnostic features right there with the hay included, right? So nothing new, but it can look really confusing if you don't recognize, especially if you don't recognize that first yod used to be a first vav. In the same way, a third hay used to be a third yod. All right, does that make sense? Everybody good? Okay. All right. Just keep in mind that all we've done is we learned our call stem with all the 6 different conjunction. Now we're looking at it in terms of the Niphal stem, and we're just seeing what changed. There's our call, and now we added the Niphal to it. But in the weak form, and so we still have our Niphal here, right? It's still there. It's still there. It's still there. It's still there. But in the weak forms, we'll see some changes because of the weak gutturals. And that's all we're looking at. So there's very little that's new, really. It's just recognizing, I remember that. And hopefully you keep strengthening as you go. So I like it when I hear, like, okay, it's because of the assimilation or it's because of compensatory lengthening. Then that means you're beginning to recognize, I see what happened. And so when you start trying to break things down, you can sort of remember some of the rules the more that we do this. All right, here's the big picture. We're almost done. So here's the big picture. Here's our strong, right? So if we were to do the kal perfect, we'd be here. But we make Niphal, we add the prefix for the Niphal, right? In a perfect form, there's our imperfect prefix, and there's our Niphal prefix similarly in the dogish. In the imperative form, normally that would just drop off, but if we do that, remember in the call, that's what happens. But in the Niphal, if we do that, we lose all the diagnostic features that are necessary. So they put this hay there, and we retain these diagnostic features. There's our noon right there in that dogish. And the same here, that's all the same. In one form of the infinite construct, we have the exact same thing, but we have the whole vav there. Infinite absolute whole vav. You know that this is not the same as that because that retains the noon for the Niphal prefix. Here's the noon for the Niphal prefix. It has the kamates versus the potic. That's how you differentiate. Then you say, well, what happens on the third aleph? Well, the third aleph keeps its noon, and instead of having the potic at compensatory length, or I think it's compensatory length, I could be wrong, and the kamates, we retain our prefix for the imperfect, and we retain our noon for the Niphal in the dogish, and all the other diagnostic features remain the same. The same here. The only difference is we got this hay added in order to maintain the diagnostic features. The same there. How do you know the difference between a third hay? an imperative. Let me clear this up. How do you know the difference between these two? They look the same. How would you tell the difference? Somebody want to answer that? One's an imperative, one's an infinite construct. How do you remember the difference?
The imperative normally appears at the beginning of the sentence.
Correct. And 90% of the time, infinite construct will be with what?
Will be accompanied with absolute, infinite absolute.
No, not an infinite absolute. You're thinking of a construct noun.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolute noun. That's right. Don't mix up the nouns and the verbs. So you do have a construct noun and then absolute noun, and the absolute nouns always last.
Yeah.
The construct nouns precede it, could have a string of them, but in the verb form, the infinite construct is not the same as the infinite absolute by any means, and 90% of the time, it's going to be accompanied with a somebody tell me what that is.
Conjugations.
Not conjugation, no.
No? But indicate position, but I forgot the name.
Prepositions.
Prepositions.
So most often, our infinite construct form won't be at the beginning of the sentence generally, and if it is, still it will be 90% of the time accompanied with a preposition. The bait, the dependent prepositions, the ones that attach, the bait, the lamed, and the caught. There's only three, right? So you'll see oftentimes with that. That's how you differentiate between these two. All right. And again, in our infinite absolute, what are we seeing? We're seeing the whole involve. We maintain the noon. In a participle, we maintain the noon, but we keep the comates. So, all right. And in the third hey, pretty much the same thing. We maintain the noon quite often. There's the noon in the dogish. Nothing's changed. We got our prefix with the imperfect. And there we have the same thing, except now we're using the hey to maintain the diagnostic features. Same thing with the hey, maintaining the diagnostic features. Everything else is the same. The noon is maintained in one form of the infinite absolute, but in the other, it's the hey, because the noon assimilates. So you'll see it two different ways. That's the point. And the noon is maintained in the participle. Now, the only difference now is that you have these vowel letters, the Kamates hey, the Segol hey, the Sere hey, the Segol hey, and the whole involved tav, and here's the whole involved hey, whole involved, and this hey ending, defective whole, right?
Brother Dave?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking the last word in the first yod to the right in the bottom.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I don't know if you will arrive there, but I was thinking that could take the yod because he has the noon. You can have the yod with the dagesh forte, or it get confused with the hirek and become a hirek yod.
Okay, you're saying it could not take the yod? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
I was thinking, what happened if take the yod instead of the vav? Because I was doing it in my mind because yeah, the yod can take the dagesh forte. The only problem that I see is to put that hirek under the noon because it can get confused with the hirek yod. Is that okay? Or
I
you
think
don't?
that's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, that would look like a vowel letter and not the consonant yod. That's right. So is that why it actually reverts back to its original vav form? I don't really know, but that would be a logical possibility. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. All right, so we'll continue walking through it. Now, don't forget here, there is this yod used to be a third hey. or excuse me, third hey used to be the yod, third yod, and so here it is simulate or it reverts back, probably because the form has lengthened, and because it lengthened, it retains the third hey, but it reverts back to its original form of third yod. Here the third hey drops. Here the third hey drops. Here it drops, 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 drops. But here it's retained in the form of its original third yod. Okay, so first guttural I think is really quite simple. We're going to retain the noon in three forms: the perfect, the participle, and the infinite absolute. Wherever you retain the noon, that makes life much simpler. Here's our root one, root two, root three. Because it's a guttural, it's going to use a hot tep vowel. Because it's guttural, it's going to use a hot tep vowel. Some cases, in the participle and in the perfect, it's going to use the sigol hot tep vowel. But in the infinite absolute, it's going to use the potic hot tep vowel. The result is it will the noon prefix will retain or use, instead of the Herrick, it'll use the vowel from the hot tep vowel. That's all that is. You've seen that before. Here in the first guttural, you can't put the dogged forte, so you get compensatory lengthening. Everything else is the same. In the first noon, this is where you got to say, okay, did really, is this root one, two, three? Nope, that's not. There's root one right there, because that is the Niphal prefix, and you see the Niphal prefix. And remember, the perfect and the participle pretty much follow the same form as is one form of the infinite construct. There, the noon is retained. Excuse me, not the noon is not retained. The noon is retained, except it's in the dogish of the second root position, which is where it should be, right? We got that's an ugly box, right? Here's our noon. We can put our prefix to it, and so that noon is going to simulate to here and go away, not really go away, and that's what happens. In the other cases, this is root one, one, two, three, and this dogish is the prefix for the Niphal noon. That's all that's happening. But all the other, notice all the diagnostic features remain the same. First yod can be the most difficult in that the yod is completely gone. It's replaced in every single instance with the vav. The only difference is to be careful of is where the noon for the prefix for the Niphal, this is the noon for the Niphal, is retained. We know it's retained in the perfect, the participle, in one form of the infinite construct, no, one form of the infinite absolute, but it's not being used here. Where the noon is typically retained for the Niphal, then the first noon root position, root one, root two, root three, that changes to the vav. Here it's a vav, holem vav, vowel letter. Here it's the consonant vav with the dogish forte and the kamate. So that remains. This has the exact same the same diagnostic features. It's just that vav used to be the first yod. That's all. Make sense? You guys understand it? All right, let's see how much you understand. All right. Ben. We'll go here. Ben, first, third olive. What is in the first, what are these diagnostic features in the perfect, imperfect, imperative, infinite construct, and infinite absolute and participle? Just run through it real quick. What do I put in these blocks?
Okay. On the perfect, we have the noon,
Right?
and then under the sare, we have the kame.
Right.
And on
Because of the olive, so we get that lengthening. That's right. What about under the noon? What goes there?
under the noon, we have It's okay because we have a dog. See, would it be doggish?
Well, a dot is just not going to underneath. I think you're thinking of the right thing. It's the little dot, yes. Okay, but that's the heric vowel.
Hearing. Okay.
You're right. Uh, and so this is my root 1 position, root 2 position, and root 3 position. And in the perfect form, the Niphal prefix is going to try to retain the noon. What about over here? The noon is not present. It is present, but not in the noon form. We want to say
So
what goes
to
here.
compensate, you write below the yod. You write the well, it keeps coming the doggish, but it's yeah. The don't you just write like the little doggish there,
Oh, you
and
mean
then
the heric?
the heric, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Put the
and
heric.
then below the mem, you write the sigol.
Okay, not the Seagull, but
Comment. Okay.
and then what about here?
Where on the imperative?
Right here on the imperfect.
Imperfect. Oh, it's empty there. So there, you write not the whole involved, but the valve.
No, not the vowel. What happens is the noon has to get, it's going to simulate. So I'm going to simulate, then I'm going to put that doggish right here, right?
Oh, but what consonant is there? Is it just an empty box or what?
Well, let me clear it up so we can make it visible. Okay. So
Oh, it's the
this,
mem. Yeah. You
yeah, the
put
mem.
the
So that's root 1, root 2,
doggish.
3. And so that doggish is going there to represent the noon
Then on.
that's supposed to be there. And it is in through the noon. And so here's our heric that you said, and the commate's there. That is our vowel pattern. So what goes here in the imperative?
Inside the mem?
Or here now in the imperative, what goes
Oh, the
here?
imperative. Okay, we put the whole involved.
No, it's going to be the same vowel pattern as here, same vowels, right?
Okay, so then we write down
And here
the
and the
hey.
and the doggish, which is representing that noon. But what
So we
about
write
here?
the hey.
Yes, exactly. What about here?
There we also write the hey.
Yes, with what vowel letter underneath it, or vowel underneath it?
Underneath it, we also write down the hearing.
Right, very good. Exactly right. Now, over here in the infinite absolute in one form, we're going to have the what vowel letter is going here?
And there goes the colon vowel.
The whole involved, exactly. That's the one you've been wanting to get to for a while. So the whole involved goes there. What about what prefixes?
The prefix should be the noon, doesn't it?
In one form will be the noon, right? And if we have the noon, and then the herica there. Notice there is no doggish forte here. Why? Because we have the noon. It's there. So, right? What about here?
Yes.
Well,
On the
that's
last,
hey, sorry, it's a different line. I apologize. What about in the participle?
the participle, since we have already the three consonants
Yes.
there, we also add the noon at the beginning.
Very good. We're good at the noon, and then we'll put the
doggish.
underneath it. What about here?
There would be
Symbol.
is it the comet?
Yes, it is the comates, right? Because here we have the potic,
Okay.
right? The noon. Well, actually, here we have the comates because of the olive, but normally we'd have the potic there. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. So very good. Okay, Patrick, what about the third hay?
Okay. With the perfect, the hays are the third root. So we will bring the prefix of the noon.
Okay, so maintain the noon. And would it be a vowel letter there or vowel?
That would be um, a Herrick.
Right. Okay. What about in the imperfect form?
In the imperfect form, we still have the he as the
Okay.
third root.
Yeah, you still got the hey for the third hey form, but it's not really the hey, it's the hey vowel with the segol, right?
Yes.
All right.
Hey, vowel is
What about under the yod? What vowel goes underneath the yod?
as the Harry.
The herrick, yep. Okay. And what about in the underneath the bait in root
That
one?
would be Comet.
Mates, yeah, exactly right. And what about inside the bait?
Dagish.
Well, why is that doggish there?
Because stream is gone.
Okay, why is this doggish here? It's not over here.
Okay. Dagish.
So the doggish is not in this first position. It is in this first position. Why is it there and not here? We're going to find the doggish is going to be here as well. It's going to be here as well. It's not there and it's not there. Why do we have a doggish in these places? Why is there a doggish there? Why is there a doggish there? Not there and not there. What does the doggish represent?
Um,
What's missing? We're dealing with what? The Niphal? Niphal is
yeah.
prefix is what? The noon. That doesn't look like a noon.
No.
Okay, so why is this
Okay, because the noon has assimilated.
There you go. That's exactly right. The noon has assimilated. Okay. Now, what do I do over here? We got the doggish because, again, the noon is assimilated. What goes here?
The Herrick.
Very good. Hey, here it, and what here?
Like the Comet.
Yeah, and the same thing here, right? Right?
Yeah.
Here it and the comates, right? There's our
Comet.
noon assimilated. What about here? Let me clean this up a little bit. Oh, don't do that. Clean this up a little bit. Where are we at? We're here. What about here?
That's the infinite absolute.
Yeah. And
Okay.
what goes here?
You bring the noon Herrick there.
Yeah. Noon here. And that's really it, right? Now here,
Yeah.
we're going to do the same thing that we had over here.
Yeah.
Doggish, comates, right? Same thing. We're just going to do it here, right?
Yeah.
Same, okay. And then we get our participle form.
Participle.
Our participles maintain the noon so far and has the comates there. What about here? What happens to the participle form here?
That's the noon Herrick.
Yeah, the noon here, right? And that's it. So good job. Okay.
Thank you.
Makes sense? You see it, Patrick? You okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Baidu, first guttural. right? There's our root 1, 2, 3. What we really want is we want to see where the noon is, and we want to see any prefixes such as the imperfect yod or whatever, that kind of stuff. So what goes in these positions here? Normally, let's compare. Normally, first root position, second root position, third, I would see a segol, 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 segol. What goes here?
Nun Sego.
Okay, but not a segol because it can't, right? What is that letter? That is a guttural letter. It's first guttural, so it won't take a segol. So you're close. You're getting very close to it, but it won't take the segol. So what letter do I want to put here?
Hata Sego.
Yes, a hot tough segol. Let me write it here. Right? And so over here, it's going to be what letter? You remember? Right? In a perfect, we generally retain the noon, so pretty consistent. But I'm not going to put the here. I'm going to put what vowel?
Nun.
What vowel? That is the noon. It's an ugly noon. That's a really ugly noon. Uh, ah,
Sego.
yes, the segol. I'm going to follow the segol pattern from the hotep vowel. That's right. So the noon goes here. That's exactly right. Do you remember what goes in the stem vowel? Root 1, root 2 is our stem vowel, root 3. Remember what goes there? Yeah, looks like some of my things moved around a bit. I don't know why. That's going to be the product. Okay. It's following the same perfect product right there. Okay. Some things have changed. All right. All right. Over here, we're going to do what? I should see it find a noon. This is our imperfect, right? Our imperfect prefix. Prefix. I should also have this noon prefix to be my Niphal. I really want that noon there, but it won't go. It won't go. But what does happen? Well, you should have, if the noon gets simulated, it would simulate there, but it can't because that is a guttural. So what happens? What vowel's here?
Kamit.
I'm sorry?
Kamit.
You said it.
Serik.
Yeah, sere, right? So that heric lengthens to a sare, compensatory lengthening, to compensate for the Niphal that's supposed to be assimilated into the dogish forte in the first position, but it won't because that is a guttural. So there's compensation there. What is the next vowel? See if I clean up without messing up.
Kamit.
What did you say?
Kamit.
Right, comates. So basically, we're retaining all of this. That should have that there. All we're retaining all of this, except that we cannot get this guttural because of the or cannot get the dogish forte because of the guttural. So we get compensatory lengthening. All right. We're going to see the same thing here, right? First guttural. Normally, what would go here? Look, what goes here? This goes here. But it's going to be the serre because it's compensatory lengthening instead of the segol, and that's our comates. Same thing here, right?
Yes.
And on down the line, right? And here's our Holovav vowel letter, and the noon.
Patek.
Product, and
Patat.
look here. Remember, our participle is going to look much like the perfect, right? It's going to maintain that noon. And again, it does not need a Doggett forte because it doesn't simulate. The noon retains. And so we still keep the Herrick. And excuse me, I apologize. That's not correct. I am wrong. I remember now. Instead,
Sego.
because this would normally be a Shavah, we can't make it Shavah because it's a guttural. So we have the Segol. That's really ugly. Really.
Sego.
Hatif Segol, right? Remember?
Yeah.
Okay, Hatif Segol. And that means this is going to take the Segol as well. And that's going to be our Kamech. Okay? Make sense?
Yes. Yes.
David, first noon?
Okay. I find something interesting, maybe that can help you guys. The press perfect and participle start with P, and it means present. So you can identify the noun is present when you have those P.
And
All
then
other
is person.
like present.
Present.
The P is for present, so the noun is present.
The noon is present. Okay, so P, noon is present. Noon is present. That's
I
what it's
noticed that can be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. All
Okay.
right. So with that knowledge, what do we do on the first noon?
Okay.
What we should see, right, is the Niphal noon and a root one noon. So we should have two noons, root one, root two, and root three.
Mhm. But you have the Dagesh forte already on the inside of the tsare, so it's
Yeah.
assimilated. So
What's
you
it
still
simulating? What is it simulating? The root noon or the Niphal prefix noon?
it assimilates the first consonant.
Okay, so the root one. So the root one is simulated right there, and that is, and then we have what it goes here.
Num and Hirik.
Yeah, and
In this case is Parak because you don't
yeah, it's
have
going to
to.
pretty much follow the perfect form as much as it can, right?
Mhm.
All right, and the other should be really easy because we're doing the same thing over and over again, right? What goes in these three boxes?
Uh, Inside the Num, there's go the Dagesh forte. Under the Num goes the Kamets, and under the Yod comes the Hirik.
Okay, what is that Dagesh forte representing?
The first consonant. No,
Is it
I
the
mean,
first consonant?
no, in this case is the num, the prefix num.
The prefix noon, that's right. In the first case, it's the prefix noon. And one way you can really know that, let me get back to my markings here. One way you can really know that is that this doggish is in this is not root 1, 2, 3. Actually, it is root 1, 2, 3. Root 1, 2, 3, and there's the doggish that goes there. There's our Herrick and our Kamates. Otherwise, the doggish would be over here. And you're going to see the doggish is going to be right there, the same thing, right? The noon, Herrick, and Kamates kind of thing. So, all right, you get the same thing over and over here, right? What
Yeah.
goes here? What goes right here in these boxes?
Hey
Right,
and Hirik,
right.
and then under the num goes the Kamets, and
Yep.
inside the num goes the Dagesh forte.
Okay, what about here?
Same.
Same thing, right?
Yeah,
A,
same.
Hirik, comates, and Dagesh forte, which represents the noon of the prefix, the Niphal prefix.
Mhm.
That's what that Dagesh is, okay? And here, oh wait, let's go back to here in our infinite construct form.
Okay. In that case, you have a Holland buff in the middle of the Lamed and the
Yeah, I think this goes over here. I think I messed up, okay? I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the Holland Vav is
Yes, it
correct.
does.
Yeah, Holland Vav is correct.
and then Nun with Hirik.
The what with Hirik?
Nun with Hirik.
Yeah, the noon with Hirik, because what happens is that here we're going to do the hay with the Hirik and the comates and the Dagesh forte, and then the other form is going to maintain the noon. But we do have here a Dagesh forte. That Dagesh forte represents what?
First consonant.
Yeah,
The-
so this noon is actually the Niphal prefix, right? Very good. So the same thing here in the first yod. We see the same thing over and over again, right? Here's the noon, except now this first yod, it becomes a vav. But because the noon is retained, this is our root 1 position, root 2 position, root 3 position. Because the noon is retained, this is a holem vav letter. So remember the first yod used to be a first vav, ugly vav. And then, of course, we have the potic here, just like we have up here. Then we got the same thing here. Here we have our Hirik yod, which we would expect for our imperfect, right? Our imperfect form. And then we're going to have not a holem vav, but we're going to keep the holem. The holem used to be the first yod. So the first yod is gone. So here's our root 1, root 2, root 3. It's not the first yod. It's a holem now, but it has a comates and it has a Dagesh forte to represent the fact that the noon for the Niphal is assimilated. And the same thing over and over again. So we have the hay with the Hirik with the Vav that is root 1, 2, 3, the Vav, and it's assimilated Dagesh forte for the noon that's not shown, along with its comates. So we're retaining really all the same form here. Nothing's really changed. The hay with the Hirik, here again is the holem vav that was the first yod. It came back with the Dagesh forte that represents the noon prefix, and then the comates, just like this is up here, right? Same thing. And over here in our participle form, it likes to retain the noon for the Niphal prefix, so it retains that. Again, the first yod becomes a vav. In this case, it's the holem vav. So in the same way, as he mentioned, the noon is retained in the perfect and the participle, right? The noon is retained in those two. It's also still retained there. In those two cases, you have the holem vav letter that takes the place of the first yod. In the other cases, where the noon is not retained or the noon assimilates, then it's a holem vav consonant with the comates and the noon assimilation. Make sense? Okay, guys. Oh, we're past time. Okay, I better get off. I didn't take that long. I apologize. Let's close real quick. All right, so thank you, guys. Listen, I'm almost caught up on all the tests. I'll be caught up this week, I believe, by the weekend. And let me shut off so the other class can get in. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.